I welcome you to my channel. Subscribe and listen to my new stories every day. The office was decked in balloons and streamers, a festive contrast to the typical gray cubicles. As I walked through the maze of desks with a cake in my hands, I noticed her, Miranda, my wife, laughing and chatting animatedly with her coworkers. It was her birthday, and her office had thrown her a surprise party. I had agreed to show up with the cake as a special gesture, hoping to surprise her myself. Little did I know, the true surprise was waiting for me. As Miranda cut the first slice of cake, her colleague, a tall man with a too bright smile named Tom, stepped forward with a wrapped box. "For the birthday girl," he announced, handing it to her with a wink. Everyone's eyes were on Miranda as she tore the paper, revealing a sleek, velvet box. Inside, a silver bracelet shimmered under the fluorescent lights. Murmurs of approval rippled through the room. "That's stunning, Tom. You shouldn't have." Miranda exclaimed, her cheeks flushing a deeper shade. Tom just grinned. "Anything for you. Open the box fully, there's more." Puzzled but smiling, Miranda lifted the velvet lining. A folded note rested beneath. As she read, her smile faltered, her eyes flickering up to meet Tom's. Unnoticed by others, a silent exchange passed between them. My heart raced with a sudden, sinking feeling. I moved closer, pretending to admire the bracelet, and caught a glimpse of the note. "Thanks for a wonderful weekend," it read. Laughter erupted around the office as someone joked, "Guess the cat's out of the bag now, huh?" I stood there, perplexed and heart-pounding. Miranda laughed nervously, trying to brush it off as a joke, but the words burned in my mind. She hadn't been at work last weekend. She'd told me she had a mandatory work retreat. The room spun slightly as I pieced together the lies. The whispered phone calls, the late nights at work, the unexplained absences. How had I been so blind? The festivity of the room became a distant buzz as a cold resolve settled over me. I knew then what I had to do. As the party dwindled, I confronted Miranda. "We need to talk. Now." In the privacy of a vacant conference room, the truth came tumbling out. The weekend away, the lies, it had all been real. Miranda's eyes, once filled with love, now held a different sheen, a mixture of regret and defiance. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way," she said, her voice a whisper. But sorry wasn't enough. Not for the betrayal, not for the shattered trust. As I walked out of her office that day, the resolve within me hardened. I would not let this deceit go unpunished. I would reclaim my life, my dignity. Miranda would understand the full extent of her actions, even if it meant breaking everything we had built together. The stage was set, the characters known, and the plot of my revenge began to unfold. The night after the revelation was the longest of my life. Every tick of the clock was a loud chime of betrayal, echoing in the empty space of our bedroom. Miranda had not come home, she stayed at a friend's, she texted. But I knew better now. The truth had a sharper edge than any knife. Morning found me at the doorstep of my best friend, Alex, who was also my attorney. He opened the door, taking in my haggard appearance with a frown. "You look like hell," he said as he led me into his home office, cluttered with legal books and papers. "I feel worse," I admitted, sinking into a chair across from his desk. "I need your help, Alex. It's about Miranda." His expression turned serious as I recounted yesterday's disaster. When I finished, he leaned back, steepling his fingers. "So, you want a divorce?" "Not just a divorce," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I want to ensure she regrets betraying me. I want to protect myself from further damage." Alex nodded slowly, understanding lighting his eyes. "All right. First, we need proof. Any financial irregularities, evidence of her affair, anything that would stand in court. You have access to your bank statements, emails." "I do. We share a computer at home." "I'll start digging there. Good. While you handle that, I'll draft the initial divorce papers and set up some consultations with private investigators. We need solid evidence if you want full leverage. The plan set, I left Alex's house feeling not better, but empowered with a purpose. At home, I turned our shared office upside down. Bank statements, credit card receipts, old emails, anything that could be of use. It didn't take long before I found hotel bookings and restaurant receipts for weekends she was supposedly working. Each discovery was a stab in the heart, but I pushed through, documenting everything. The pile of evidence grew, each piece a brick in the fortress I was building around myself. The following day, I met with Alex again, handing over the documents. "This is good," he noted, flipping through the papers. "It shows a pattern. We can use this. What's the next step?" I asked, eager to keep moving, to keep my mind off the hurt. "Now, we wait for the PI to get back to us with more concrete evidence of her affair. In the meantime, keep things normal with Miranda. Don't let on what you're planning." Nodding, I felt a chill settle over me. Pretending everything was normal with Miranda would be the hardest role I'd ever played, but necessary. Every smile, every conversation, would be a performance. But behind the scenes, the wheels of retribution were already turning. The game was on, and I was determined to emerge victorious, no matter the personal cost. Weeks of feigned normality stretched between Miranda and me like a tightrope. Each day, I played the part of the unsuspecting husband, all the while the evidence against her grew. The private investigator Alex hired proved to be worth every penny, delivering photos and videos that left no room for doubt. I remember the evening I decided it was time to confront Miranda. It was a typical Thursday, and she was late coming home again, her text claiming another emergency at work. But the investigator's message from earlier echoed in my head: "She's not at work. She's been at the cafe on 5th Street for the past 3 hours." When she finally arrived home, I was waiting in the living room, the stack of photos and papers from the PI spread out on the coffee table like a dealer's hand in poker. "James, why are you sitting in the dark?" Miranda's voice wavered as she flicked on the light, her eyes widening at the sight of the evidence displayed before her. "We need to talk, Miranda," I said calmly, standing to face her. "Or should I say, you need to start talking." Miranda's face paled as she dropped her bag and took a tentative step forward. "James, Save it," I interrupted, my voice hard. "I know everything. The weekends, the lies, the man from your office. What I want to know is why." The room was thick with tension, her gaze flickering over the damning photos. Finally, she sank into a chair, her posture deflated. "I don't know, James. I never planned for any of this to happen. It just did." "That's not good enough," I shot back. "Not after everything we've built together." "I know I've messed up," she said, tears brimming in her eyes. "But can we try to?" "There's no we in this scenario, Miranda. You made sure of that." My tone was icy, reflecting the chill in my heart. "So, what now? What do you want from me?" Her voice cracked, the reality of our crumbling marriage finally hitting her. "I want a divorce," I stated without hesitation. "And I'm taking everything. The house, the savings. You'll leave with what you came into this marriage with." "Nothing." Miranda gasped, her hands trembling. "You can't do that, James. Please, let's talk about this." But the time for talking had long passed. "It's already in motion. My lawyer will contact you tomorrow. I suggest you find one for yourself." Standing up, I felt a strange mix of victory and profound sorrow. This was not how I envisioned our story would end. As Miranda wept, I turned away, unable to reconcile the woman before me with the one I had loved. That night, I left the house to stay with a friend, the finality of my actions settling in. The betrayal had been avenged, but the taste of revenge was bitter. I realized then that the path ahead would be lonely, but necessary. The battle lines were drawn, and there was no turning back. The days following the confrontation were a blur of legal meetings and cold, sleepless nights. I moved swiftly, ensuring the divorce proceedings were as advantageous to me as possible. Miranda's pleas for reconciliation went ignored. My heart had hardened beyond repair. The final court date arrived sooner than expected. I sat across from Miranda in the sterile courtroom, our eyes meeting only briefly. There was no warmth in her gaze, only a deep, simmering resentment that matched my own. As all assets have been discussed and divided according to the prenuptial agreement and subsequent findings, we are prepared to finalize the proceedings, the judge announced, her voice echoing slightly in the quiet room. Before the judge could continue, I stood, my chair scraping sharply against the floor. "Your Honor, if I may," I said, my voice steady but my palms sweating. "Proceed," the judge nodded. I turned to face Miranda, the papers in my hand trembling slightly. "Before we end this, I want you to know why I've taken everything from you." The courtroom was silent, the air thick with anticipation. Miranda's eyes narrowed, confusion evident on her face. "You see, the weekend you supposedly spent with Tom wasn't your first indiscretion, was it?" I said, each word deliberate. "Or even your second. I've known about your affairs for years. But this time, I needed the evidence to make sure I could leave with everything." Miranda's face drained of color, her lips parting in shock. "What are you talking about, James?" "Let me refresh your memory," I continued, pulling out a series of photos and emails, not just from her recent escapade but from years past. "I've had private investigators on you long before Tom. I knew about every lie, every secret rendezvous. And I made sure the prenup would protect me if your habits continued." The courtroom murmured, the judge's gavel slamming down. "Order. Continue, sir." Miranda was shaking, her previous facade of remorse replaced by a dawning horror. "You've been planning this for years." "Yes," I said simply. "To ensure that when I left, you'd be left with nothing. Not out of spite, but because betrayal of this depth deserves nothing less." "But why stay? Why not leave earlier?" Miranda's voice was barely a whisper. "I needed to be sure I wouldn't be the one to suffer in the end. And now, I am free of you, completely and utterly." The judge, after a moment of stunned silence, finalized the divorce, granting me the majority of our shared assets and full ownership of our home. Miranda was left with barely enough to start anew, the consequences of her choices laid bare. As I walked out of the courtroom, the weight of my actions began to settle on my shoulders. I had won, yes, but at what cost? The game of revenge had consumed me, and now that it was over, I was left with a hollow victory. Months later, reports reached me through mutual friends that Miranda had moved far away, a broken and isolated figure. And while part of me felt vindicated, another part, perhaps the part that had once loved her, felt an unexpected pang of regret. I had imagined that revenge would bring satisfaction, but instead, I found only the bitter aftertaste of my own ruthlessness. In the end, we were both casualties of betrayal, our lives forever altered by the secrets and lies that had once bound us together. As I moved forward, alone and unencumbered, I realized the true cost of vengeance was not just what you take from others, but what you lose of yourself.